Speaker.
Jane Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to join other comments this evening in acknowledging significant passings in recent times. Both of Celia Lashley and also Robin Duff, who was the Vice President of the PPTA and an extraordinary advocate for LGBTI communities and students. And Celia obviously, I think, has helped expand our understanding of the world and how it functions, and also helped us understand and see the best that's possible in our boys and how to bring that out in them. And we are poorer for the loss of both of them. So on to this bill, and it's hard not to want to jump in and respond to the hyperbole of the previous speech, which bordered on, one of those speeches you give at school to prove you can extend 5 minutes talking about nothing. But on this, the Green Party will be opposing the Social Security Amendment Bill. The bill was first introduced into the House by Paula Bennett way back in the 16th of November 2010. Yes, that is over 4 years ago. And it finished in Select Committee in that same term of Parliament, and we didn't hear one word of it, well, at least I didn't, in the last term. Not one mention, to my knowledge. So I am left wondering why we didn't hear about it then, and why the apparent urgency that it's jumped up so high on the order paper in this term of Parliament. I don't have any definitive answers to that, but I do suspect it is possible that the possibility of saving a few dollars from the government budget lines when the looming budget deficit is pending, that maybe they've got that desperate, that they need to claw back $700,000 here from people on ACC and a few $100,000 here from students struggling to get by, that this government is going to stoop to taking money from people retrospectively, from clawing back from students trying to get by, just to do whatever they can to edge closer to that possibility of surplus that seems to be coming increasingly unlikely. Really is just a shame that in all too many instances we're seeing in government policy and legislation that the money towards achieving that or hoping to get towards that surplus seems to be coming from everyday New Zealanders who are struggling to get by or get ahead. The government's framed this bill as being about consistency, fairness, honesty and equity. It sounds good. How can you not support those things? We certainly support those values in the Green Party. But I do just want to point out that it depends where your starting point is. And part of the reasons for us opposing this is on those very same values, that we don't believe that what's happening in this legislation is consistent, it's not fair, and it's not promoting equity. So we're opposing it on those same reasons. So what this bill will do is ensure that students eligible for student allowances, whether or not they access them, are not eligible for an accommodation supplement through work and income. So a student may say, okay, I'm not going to apply for a student allowance even though I'm eligible for it, but I will apply for an accommodation supplement because that's worth more, and that will help me stay and study and be able to cover my basic costs. Because there's a loophole there at the moment, so that students who may be eligible for the student allowance but choose not to apply can access that. So this is looking at saying, okay, now you can't access that. Though that may make you a little bit better off, you can't do it. Because, they're saying it's about fairness, whereas we would say, actually, the fairness is around the ability to access a reasonable amount of money. As the first part, to be actually able to cover your daily living costs. That we want students, we want people to be studying, and we want students to be supported in studying. And that actually collectively as a country we have enough resource to be able to do that a bit better than we are at the moment. And it was pointed out, I think, by a previous speaker, an example in Auckland, where on income support, the accommodation, you may be able to access $225, I think I heard. Whereas if you were getting the student allowance in accommodation, it would be $65 in accommodation support. That not encouraging people to be in study, and that doesn't seem equitable or fair. And it does seem, when we were just seeing stories in the New Zealand Herald just about a week ago of students queuing up now with hundreds of people in the queues to get into a flat that's in any way close to their tertiary institution, and are turning up with CVs with photos of themselves on it because to prove that they're going to be desirable tenants. They're turning up with parents. They're offering more money than what's actually being asked for these places. There is so much competition for housing in Auckland, and that is something that is echoed in different ways in other parts of the country. So our position is that the fair response to that situation would be for a government to look at our resources and look at how we can better support students and other New Zealanders into good accommodation and affordable accommodation. And the easiest way of doing that in the meantime is to be able to increase the support for people to be able to pay for their accommodation in the short term until we get more housing. And yet what this government's response to that is saying, oh, well, actually these people, we think they're accessing a little bit too much money. So we're going to close that gap, sorry that was a bit loud, and make sure that less money is being distributed to help address this problem. So that doesn't seem fair, equitable or consistent. And I call the government out on their own rhetoric on that point. And really, it seems to be the government choosing to ignore the actual real hardship rather than using our shared resource to ensure the protection and empowerment of everyone equally in this country. And I think it's a real shame. And I would like to point out another aspect of this bill will speak to the point around ACC, which there's part of this that we do support, and that, like, the concept of it, between the difference between the state-funded ACC provision versus the private schemes, and that doesn't seem to make sense that there would be a difference there. But I would note that, so at present, benefit payments are deducted from weekly ACC compensation payments on a dollar-by-dollar basis. However, a loophole was discovered through a case in the Social Security Appeal Authority revealed that in law, weekly compensation paid directly by employers accredited with ACC should be treated as income and deducted from benefits at a different, more favourable ratio. So the current practice, which this bill is seeking to retrospectively validate, and I really do need to point out again, if we're talking about consistency, we're talking about equity, we're talking about fairness, retrospectively validating a practice is not consistent, fair or equitable, and is repugnant to good legislative practice, actually. So that will be able to result in someone who's been on a benefit while working part-time suddenly having their benefit reduced to zero after an injury. And we've heard that, you know, what is it going to be, a recovered 3.2 million from doing that, where it's going to be 700,000 going forward. So there'll be a retrospective factoring in of those costs to help reach the government surplus, and in a way that's completely inconsistent and unfair, I would suggest. The Green Party doesn't support people being able to double dip. The dollar-for-dollar deduction is fair enough if someone's eligibility for weekly compensation is caused by the same event as his or her eligibility for welfare. But that wasn't factored into this legislation. And in fact, when somebody's receiving, say, a sickness benefit in respect of a chronic illness or any other reason, but's working part-time, and it's completely unfair to exclude that and to suggest that that's double dipping, which is what this legislation does in part. So therefore, again, we find that aspect of it we are unable to support, because again, that is not fair, it's not consistent, and it's not equitable, and it's not about helping to create the society where everyone has a fair go, where everyone has an equal chance of participating and achieving, when we know that that vision of a society isn't far-fetched, it's entirely possible, but we need to have the attention to detail in our legislation to ensure that's what we're providing. Kia ora.
I call Derek Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise on behalf of New Zealand First